I want to talk about some tender things today, tender and deeply concerning things related to where we are in this country in the year 2020 on race relations and the issues of reparations and how we move forward in this very challenging time. I want to start by talking with you about back in the era of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the very famous debate he had when he was running for president with Stephen Douglas. And so the Lincoln-Douglas debates had huge consequence in America. And in those debates, Douglas used the argument to support slavery by quoting language that actually came from a Supreme Court decision. In the Dred Scott decision, where the Supreme Court essentially upheld slavery, but the point of what Douglas was quoting was this. Douglas was using language from the Dred Scott decision of the Supreme Court to support slavery, and he said in the debate with Lincoln, using the language again from Chief Justice Taney in the Dred Scott decision, that black people were never included in the principle that all men are created equal. That phrase, all men created equal, and the famous phrase in the Declaration of Independence, really just meant that all British subjects residing in America were equal to the British subjects living in Britain. With that narrow understanding, narrow interpretation of all men created equal, Stephen Douglas was able to argue, hey, look, the Supreme Court even said it in the Dred Scott decision. But Abraham Lincoln had some commentary I want to share with you. It's extremely relevant to what we're facing today in our country. Abraham Lincoln spoke back in July of 1858, so this is before the Civil War. He spoke at a celebration leading up to July 4th. It was a July 4th celebration a few days early. He spoke in Chicago, and Lincoln said he remarked on that day that the celebration reminded him of the good done in the Revolution, or how it was done, and who did it. But he pointed out as well that most of the people now celebrating, so they're in 1858, the Declaration was 1776, so he's into 1858, he's saying most of the celebrants there sprang from families who had come to America much later. He said, perhaps half of our people are not descendants at all of these men, these British founders of America. There are men who came from Europe. They're German, Irish, French, Scandinavian. Men that have come from Europe themselves or whose ancestors have come hither and settled here, finding themselves our equals in all things. The point he was making, and he went on to elaborate, was the idea that the language about all men created equal in the Declaration of Independence could not have meant what the Supreme Court had said in the Dred Scott decision, could not have meant what Stephen Douglas said they meant, although he hadn't said it yet, but how he would use that language. And he went on to say, these people look at the country. He said, if those people look back to trace their connection with those days of our founding by blood, they find they have none. Most Americans today if we trace back our ancestry, very few of us can trace back ancestry all the way to the founding of America. Most of us have ancestors who came here after the founding of America. And he talked about the idea of the old Declaration, they can't do that. People today can't, this is Lincoln saying 1858, I'm saying today even more true. These people look at the country and themselves through that old Declaration of Independence, and they find that those old men say that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And then they feel that moral sentiment taught in that day evidences their relation to those men, that it is the father of all moral principle in them, and that they have a right to claim it as though they were blood of the blood and flesh of the flesh of the men who wrote that declaration. And so they are, getting at the point that the Declaration, the promise of America and the very founding of America, even though it wasn't founded perfectly, even though the Constitution had to get done, had to contemplate slavery, had to be consistent with the morals of that time, the ethos of that time, and so women couldn't vote. but the idea of the Declaration was all men created equal, and this concept that what we really are, that although we don't have common ancestry with the British who came to America and founded our country, but we have common ancestry as the father of all moral principle. This is one of the most foundational points I tried to make on this show repeatedly and in many contexts, the idea that America is a beautiful idea for many, many reasons, including that anyone can come here and become an American. I could go to the country of Italy, I could follow whatever laws they have, try to become a citizen of Italy, maybe I would succeed and become a citizen of Italy, but I'll never be Italian because I'm not Italian. It's not my ethnicity. And the point about America that so many are making, and the beauty of America is, you come here, and when you embrace the ideas of America, the ideas of the Declaration, the ideas of the Constitution, the ideas of the rule of law, the freedom of the individual, all the ideas we talk about in the show so much, you are just as much an American as a person who can trace their ancestry back to the Mayflower, or a person whose family came here a year ago. You're as much an American, no matter your skin color, race, ethnicity, national origin, or prior status of your ancestors. You're as much of an American today if you happen to be the descendants of slaves who were brought to America involuntarily. You're as much of an American as an American who can trace their ancestry to the Mayflower, and everybody else who came here at every point and for every reason, at every point in time in between. That's what being American is. And this is something that used to be taught, used to be understood, used to be commonly embraced, and was very much a resounding, organizing principle of America's greatness and goodness, that people understood their identity as an American, not in the slightest because of their skin color, race, or ethnicity, because they bought into the values of America. That's what being an American is. So where we are today, where we're in the middle of just great chaos in this country. We've had riots around the country destroying cities and businesses owned by, many businesses owned by Black Americans, riots supposedly on behalf of Black Lives Matter, but really on behalf of this Marxist revolution that we are watching in front of our faces today. This revolution is a challenge to the very fabric and founding and idea of America. And it's done by the Marxists trying to destroy this country under the pretext, the lie, that they are working to push and bring racial justice. They are not. They are pushing to destroy the foundations of America. And because the foundations of America have endured for so long, have been taught for so many generations, it has taken the Marxists in this country, it's taken the leftists in this country, decades of insidious invasion into our school system, into the common American culture, the psyche, the very identity of America. This is what the left has done, trying to undermine that glorious uniting principle of the Declaration and that notion that all of us are created equal, and trying to recast America into a vision that the left hopes will make Americans hate their own country. The left has been doing this for decades. They are doing it to us now. Leftists in this country, anti-American leftists, Marxist, socialist, communists, Antifa, whatever you want to call them, they're on a mission to cause Americans to hate the idea of America, because they want, and to do that, they are twisting and turning and contorting the idea of America. They are intentionally creating racial tension in our country, intentionally trying to make people define themselves by their race, define themselves by a hyphenated name, by their race, stick them in a silo and say, that's who you are, that's all you are, you have no value and no identity outside of this assigned race we are giving you, this assigned category. That is the mission of the left. They've been at it for decades, and that's what I want to dive into and talk about. And in closing out this first five today, I want to make the point that you can watch the riots in our country and think, okay, well, the Marxists have gone kind of crazy, and Antifa's kind of crazy, and Antifa, we talked about yesterday with Gordon Chang on this show, Antifa and the far left in this country very much being fed by the Communist Party of China, very much being fed by them. I mean, supplied with ideas and money. The incredible unrest in our country is not genuine. It is not motivated by anyone who understands the idea of America. It's a very dangerous time in our country. It's a time when the enemies of our country, and I mean by enemies China, as well as enemies internally in our country, who've always hated the idea of America, are working to bring it down using race as a pretext. And you may sit and think, well, I'm pretty safe from it. You know, right now there's this kind of Marxist mess or this kind of, riots in the streets mess, but it's okay. It's not in my neighborhood. It's not taking away my business. It's not yet hurting my family. But you have to understand, these people are not simply about making small changes in little pockets of America. They set up that Chaz Chop area in Seattle. They've tried it in other areas, but they're not just about little bits and pieces of America, but otherwise leaving the fabric of America's strength and goodness intact. It is ultimately about undermining the whole idea of America. So even today, even if it hasn't hurt you yet, even if you're sitting home thinking, well, I sure can't wait till the fall elections come, and I hope President Trump wins, and as long as Trump wins, and maybe we retake the House, and we hold on to the Senate, everything will be okay again. You have to understand this is an intentional revolution, an intentional overturning of all that America is. They will come for you eventually. They will come for your freedom. They will come for you and your property and your freedom and your individual rights. All of that is on the table in this election. And all of it's on the table as far as these Marxist leftists are concerned, fair game in their mission to literally undo the American Revolution and bring America to a country back to being a country ruled by tyranny instead of by the tyranny of King George, by the tyranny of the radical left that believes that is their right and their privilege and determination to do, to remove the freedoms America was founded on and to insert their tyrannical government in this country. That's what's on the ballot in 2020. And that, my very fine friends, is today First Five.